PLP leader, Senior Counsel Martha Karua, it's great to have you with us this evening despite your ordeal today. Just from the onset, did you anticipate any kind of challenge prior to your travels to Tanzania? And exactly what transpired at the airport?
I was aware that the Tanzanian authorities may not be happy with me because last time I was there, we held a press conference raising concerns about the case of Tundu Lissu and especially the refusal to have him appear in court physically and the insistence that he participates in the case virtually. So I knew they were not happy because they got the vice chair of CCM to issue a statement opposing my stand on the case. Today when I went, it was a normal day. I gave my passport and I was asked what I was going to do in Tanzania. And I said I was a guest of the East Africa Law Society. They asked me for an invitation letter. I said I didn't need one. It's a membership organization, I'm one. And the officer told me to go and see the supervisor. He first went away with my passport, then he came and asked me to see the supervisor. So we were detained at the airport, not in handcuffs, but guarded by a police officer, a lady police officer in civilian clothes. And after 1 hour, the immigration officer came back and said, he's very sorry, we will not be granted entry into Tanzania. They asked us to try and change our tickets to leave with the first available Kenya Airways flight to Nairobi. Eventually, I don't know who paid for the changes to our ticket so that we could come on the 3 o'clock flight. My return flight was for tomorrow evening.
Correct. Senior Counsel, definitely you were going there to observe the trial that is set to begin tomorrow. But why do you think the authorities in Tanzania were trying to achieve by stopping you specifically?
I think they just don't want observers. The presence of observers is irritating to them. And it's also proof, the fact that they can deport an East African citizen or citizens means that they are actually confirming that they do not intend to have a fair process for Tundu Lissu. Remember, treason is a political offense. It pits the CCM government and Mama Samia Suluhu as the candidate of CCM against Tundu Lissu. So it's by nature political, and such trials must be followed keenly, both by Tanzanians and human rights defenders from across the divide in the world to ensure that Tundu Lissu gets a free, a fair and independent trial.
And Senior Counsel, just for the benefit of our audience who do not understand the context, why is the opposition leader Tundu Lissu facing this treason charge at this point?
For merely calling for reforms before the elections. And one of the reforms is to allow contestants to a presidential election who are dissatisfied to appeal the result by the Electoral Commission or to challenge it in a court of law. As matters stand in Tanzania, once the Electoral Commission announces the results, they are final and not subject to challenge before a court of law.
Right. And then how urgent is the situation in Tanzania at this point, considering the case that is set to begin tomorrow?
One, the elections are in October this year, the presidential elections. So putting Tundu Lissu in prison is preventing him from being on the campaign trail, banning Chadema party, which he leads, from participating in elections, is practically CCM and Mama Samia Suluhu trying to get in and oppose, because Tundu Lissu is the main challenger, no doubt about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've certainly expressed, disappointment, citing the ideals of the East African unity and freedom of movement. So how do you feel this incident really reflects on the current state of the regional cooperation of the East Africa community?
Very poorly, noting that Dr. William Ruto is the current head of the EAC, and that the Kenyan government has not issued any protest note at the treatment of 3 of its citizens, myself and 2 others. It smells of complicity between the KK administration in Kenya and the CCM administration in Tanzania. And this is a great shame. Integration is to ease movement of people, goods, and services. It is about citizens, not about the top cream of leadership in East Africa. Deporting me and my colleagues means that the administration in Tanzania is using the Jumuiya or Tanzania as personal property to fight their petty battles instead of doing what is right for Tanzania. What wrong was my presence and my colleagues doing to the state of Tanzania or to the citizens of Tanzania? What irritation was it causing the nationals of Tanzania to go and observe the case? These are leaders personalizing the state and personalizing the Jumuiya and clearly violating the foundational principles of the EAC, the rule of law principle and the ease of movement, goods and services among members of the community. And I think this is something we must resist as citizens of the community. We must also refuse authoritarian rule, which is now being regionalized in East Africa.
All right, Senior Counsel, we're going to take a short break here on NTV Weekend Edition. PLP leader and Senior Counsel Martha Karua there on her ordeal today morning as she was heading to Tanzania, where she was detained and deported subsequently back here into the country. And of course, the conversation around democracy in East Africa. Let's take a short break. We'll be back with that conversation. Well, thank you for staying with us here on NTV Weekend Edition. As we left it, we were having a conversation with PLP leader, Senior Counsel Martha Karua. We continue with that conversation regarding our ordeal today and, of course, the broader conversation on democracy in the East Africa region. Senior Counsel, you've said the member states of the East Africa community are seeing an erosion of the democratic principles, really. What do you think is driving this, and how much is it tied to the upcoming elections in some of these countries?
It's obvious that what is happening in Tanzania is about the October presidential elections. That appears to be what is motivating repression against the opposition and generally. The same case in Uganda. The general elections are in January, and we have one of the prominent opposition leaders, Dr. Kiza Besigye, his friend Obed Lutale, in custody now for close to 6 months. On 20th, which is Tuesday, they'll be doing 6 months behind bars. We have also seen repression in Uganda against the NUP party and its leader, Bobi Wine. abduction of its leaders who turn up after being tortured. We have seen repression in Kenya, abduction, and those abducted, some turning up dead, others tortured. And we saw the mass killing of the Gen Z during the Gen Z protests of last year. And that was a repeat again of the mass killings in 2023 during the Azimio demonstrations. These are leaders in East Africa trying to maintain themselves in power through subversion of the constitution and repression of citizens.
So this is a pattern that we're seeing across the East African region, where opposition voices and critics are being silenced.
Indeed, and I must add Burundi to the list, because the main opposition party, the CNL, was wrestled from the hands of its leader, Agathon Rwasa, and with ostensible aid of the ruling party there in Burundi, and the opposition is not allowed any activity. They too are having elections soon. So it looks like there's total darkness in the East Africa region. And the three leading states in democratic tradition, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, regressing on democracy spells doom for East Africa. It's up to citizens of East Africa to push back on this trend.
Senior Counsel, your detention has certainly sparked outrage, with some calling for Kenya to challenge Tanzania legally or through the EAC itself. Could this lead to some sort of legal or diplomatic engagement, and should it?
You would expect the state of Kenya to issue a protest note to Tanzania or seek to know exactly what is happening. But the silence of Kenya suggests that they are complicit. But we will not just sit and wait for the authorities in Kenya. We will take action. That's why there is the EAC court. We'll also take action in the court of public opinion, speaking out. And I want to say the government of Tanzania unwittingly has enabled sensitization of the entire East Africa, African region, and the world on the precarious state of democracy in Tanzania and in East Africa. And also the opaque trial going on of Tundu Lissu. I say opaque because if observers are not welcome, certainly it is opaque.
And I'll come back.
And it's against the law. Yeah.
And I'm going to come back to the issue of the mounting pressure on what's happening in Tanzania. But just before that, the Law Society of Kenya has called for the government to seek clarification from Tanzania. Have you at this point received any support, any communication on what transpired?
I was called by the Kenyan ambassador to Tanzania, and he told me he was calling from Kenya. That was when we were still at the airport in Tanzania. And he said that he was trying his best. I don't know how much he tried, because officials of the East African Law Society and the human rights groups tried to get in touch with the Kenyan PS for Foreign Affairs, and he was unavailable. I think Kenya has, through the action of its officials, to cover itself, not to appear complicit. But anything short of a formal request for explanation or protest means Kenya is complicit. I have no doubt in that. Look at the pattern of abductions, including the recent abduction of Maria Sarungi and her release after it got too hot before she could be renditioned. Look at what has happened to us today. The abduction of Kizza Besigye from Kenya, of Ethiopians, of Turkish nationals who are refugees, and all that. And the abduction and murder of an opposition figure in Tanzania, and the recent abduction and brutal beating leading to blood being spilled all over the house of an activist, Nyangali Mdude, in Tanzania, who to date, over 100 days later, has not been found. East African states have gone rogue. It has to be said as it is.
Mm-hmm. And Senior Counsel, certainly, like I had earlier mentioned, there are mounting pressure and mounting calls for the Tanzania authorities to, first of all, release Tundu Lissu. The EU Parliament adopted a resolution that Tanzania had violated international conventions on human rights, democracy, and the rule of law in their treatment of Lissu. Human Rights Watch said the arrest of Lissu spelled trouble for the election. You also have Amnesty International calling for urgent action from democracy stakeholders globally. With all this, global watch and all this attention on what's happening in Tanzania, does it change anything?
It ought to change something. And I'm now calling upon our regional institutions, the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. We are asking, where are you on all this? Are these institutions capable of doing something? I believe that the African Commission on Human and People's Rights has a role to play. They should step up. They should even visit Tanzania, Uganda, and Kenya to investigate the complaints of citizens. Where is the AU? And why are we having these bodies if they are of no use to the residents of East Africa and of Africa? What about the Jumuiya? Is it a cosmetic organization? And all the human rights, especially the National Human Rights Commission of the 3 East African states. Mm-hmm. So I'm calling upon also the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, which has been very supportive on the abduction cases, to also take up matters of curtailment of freedom of movement and the role of, as it pertains to the role of the Kenyan state, because their mandate is within Kenya. Mm-hmm. Let us all do the bit we can. And change will come and must come. The people have never lost against tyrants.
All right, Senior Counsel. Now, speaking of democracy and the space of opposition politics, let's bring it home here. Former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, in a recent interview, warned that mismanaging the 2027 election could spark violence worse than the 2007-2008 post-election violence. Now, this has certainly drawn widespread condemnation. Today, he said that his words were taken out of context. We have the Deputy President, Professor Kithure Kindiki, likening those comments to terrorism and banditry. I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Let's first say that there are 2 deputy presidents in Kenya, the elected one and the appointed one. Because after the ruling of the Court of Appeal, Professor Kithure Kindiki should be a bit shy of calling himself deputy president until we receive clarification. Secondly, what I understand from the second deputy president's Rigathi Gachagua's remarks is that he is warning against manipulating the electoral process. And therefore, if there is something to worry about, Dr. Ruto and his KK brigade should watch their steps and desist from manipulating the electoral process, beginning with the choices they have made of the electoral composition of the Electoral Commission. So it's a warning to them. Why are they jumping around? Is it that they have been caught red-handed? Are they manipulating? They should stop hunting Gachagua as though he is a criminal. They should indeed watch their steps and desist from manipulating the process, remembering that Ruto will be seeking a second term, and the opposition, Gachagua included, are now saying one term.
Well, SC, when we're talking...
Is it the echoes of one term that are disturbing them?
Well, SC, the question of those particular statements that the post-election violence would appear to be like a Christmas party compared to the 2007-2008 elections and the 2027 upcoming elections, would this amount to a criminal charge on the former deputy president?
I personally don't think so. I think the context in which he said so, he was issuing a warning that don't you tamper, and know clearly that tampering will can bring civil strife to the country. And we have seen what tampering does. That's why there was Azimio demonstrations before the Right Honorable Raila made some rapprochement with the KK. Wasn't that civil strife brought about by manipulation of the electoral process? Has really the remarks of the second deputy president regarding Gachagua been any different from the realities that we have seen? I would expect that Dr. Ruto and his KK brigade would be working hard to ensure we have free and fair elections, that we have protection of human rights, protection and respect, and not hounding people.
So
I'm beginning to think that perhaps they are planning manipulation. Their reactions suggest so. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Senior Counsel, I know that you're part of these plans to form some sort of political alliance with the other leaders of the other political parties, including the one by the former deputy president, the new DCP. Some of these things that you perhaps want to tackle when it comes to the issue of electoral reforms as well?
In fact, those are some of the programs the government would do. But for me, it's not so much change of the law. It's actually change of practice. Look, we have a constitution that protects the rights of everyone in black and white. Dr. Ruto and his KK administration have violated every rule in the book. The Electoral Commission in Kenya has repeatedly violated the law. It is not about the law. It's about the practice, and I would appeal to professionals who man our institutions locally and in the region. Adhere to the law and to your oath of office. You are the ones aiding and abetting subversion of the law and democracy in our countries and region. Let us do better for ourselves.
All right, let's see. The question that I'm also getting from our viewers as well, there's a lot of conversation around, we have come from a place where we were still healing from the 2007-2008 post-election violence. But for a national leader, a political leader, to make such a statement, but later on come and say that it was taken out of context, is wild.
You must ask me questions that relate to me. You ask for my view, I have given.
Right.
I do not answer for my brother, but I do not think that his statements were out of context. And by the way, we are actually healing from the murder of the Gen Zs, not the post-election. We are also healing from the recent murders in 2023. Mm-hmm. Let us not forget. And let us not forget that the witnesses of the ICC 207 trials were also quite a number were murdered. And there are people who know something about it. Mm-hmm. Failing to bring people to account who commit atrocities is the problem. The problem is not those who give warning that this can lead to strife.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough, Senior Counsel. So finally, tell me, what next for you? Do you intend to go back to Tanzania to stand in solidarity with opposition leader Tundu Lissu?
I wish I could. But if my passport is written denied entry, perhaps I'll go back when Tundu Lissu is president.
All right, so the hope is there that you will be heading there if the circumstances allow.
The hope is that one day I'll go to Tanzania because Mama Samia will not be the head of state until kingdom come. None of us human beings is forever. Yeah, so one day I'll set foot in Mwalimu Nyerere's Tanzania, which was a safe haven and refuge to all in Africa.
All right, thank you, Senior Counsel Martha Karua, and also leader of the People's Liberation Party, speaking to us about her ordeal in Tanzania today and, of course, the broader conversation on democracy and governance in the East Africa region. Thank you. Let's take a short break. We'll be back with much more.